Thanks for hanging out with us in this conversation, and we hope it to be a little bit more conversational this time. We think we have like 40 minutes. Is that right? 40 minutes together? Okay. And we're going to try and keep track of that with you. There are a couple of recurring themes in our conversations all around in the open space that we had this morning. We're going to do it again in a little bit. And one of the themes I noticed was what does it mean to nurture the loyal dissident? And a little bit back and forth edginess, pushingness with the institution and what it allows and its insecurity. How do we offer original ministry that matches our context? Some of those recurring themes, yeah? And it felt like it would be good to come back to that and to recognize that the real issue for me, as I hear that, as I relate to that in my own life, is not so much, as we said earlier, not so much about breaking the rules for the sake of accessing the future, but perhaps it's about nurturing or coming together around some new rules, some new ways of being. And Ryan and I started talking a little bit about that. So maybe this session is a little bit more about matters of the heart and how we stay in touch with and nurture what it means to serve the Spirit. Serve the Spirit in ministry, serve the Spirit in community. It sounds like a good continuation of some of what you've been bringing up, even in areas of funding. So I'm going to offer a couple of observations, and then we can interact around those a little bit, a story, and see where it takes us in more dialogue, back and forth. I want to start with this idea that behind each of our calls is a yes that cemented us to what God was calling from us in that moment. And as Otis just explained, each of us relates to that in a different ways. For some of us, it's very verbal or intellectual, and some of us, it's more kinesthetic or image-based. But there's a yes back there. And some of us are a little good at remembering the no better than the yes, but there's always a yes that originally gave us the courage to take action in response to the Spirit. And sometimes the yes is a yes born out of longing. As we were hearing about the way that this emerging community writes their hopes on a napkin and puts it in a mailbox. The only yes they knew in the moment was to make their longing known and stick it in a mailbox for mystery mail receiver. Who knows who that is? So it's sort of like sending it out, message in a bottle kind of thing to God. Where do we go with this? And somebody writes back and says, yeah, I'm here, I heard you.
Which is illegal, by the way. You're not supposed to do that.
Right. So
you're not supposed to put
don't
stuff
try
in the
this
mailbox.
at home. No. Right? So I think in our work together, when we're in conversations like this, it's really key for us to constantly go back to those yeses. Ask each other all the time, what was the yes that got you here? I find that such a powerful inquiry in relationship, even with casual people. In fact, when you're first getting to know somebody, it's almost more natural to get curious, tilt your head a little bit and say very thoughtfully, well, what was the yes that got you here? And to linger with that and not accept the no's, because we always want to offer the no that got us here. But what was the yes that got you in campus ministry or young adult ministry?
I think that's what we see Jesus doing in the Gospels all the time. That's what like the 300 or however many questions that we see in there is all about, is Jesus keep going after that, what do you want? Yeah. Just coming at the heart of desire, which is a super vulnerable, dangerous place for us.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And it often feels naive in our culture. We don't want to mess around with that. That's childish. That's idealistic, right? So my wife, Sherry, is a psychologist in private practice, and she drove around in her little car for a long time with this sticker on the dashboard that says, the longer you've been separated from your dreams, sort of like a fortune cookie thing, right? The longer you've been separated from your dreams, the more work it takes to get back to those. I loved that. I imagine the first time she opened it up, she probably looked over her shoulder like, who wrote that one? The longer you've been separated from your dreams, the more work it takes to get back to those. Ooh, that's a little personal. And yet I believe, because many of us abdicated our responsibility to nurture our dreams to the institution or the calling agency or the commission on ministry or the people hiring us for the job, many of us have been a long time away from our dreams, I would say, our original yeses. When we're working with people who've been away from them for a long how short our life is and their eyes get big, we found this little equation very helpful. It says, until our longings, I know that's touchy-feely, I'm off the charts J, so I get the recoil in the soul about longings language, and yet I know that the real miracle in the feeding of the 5,000 was not that Jesus turned the 2 loaves and fishes into enough for 15,000, because there were women and children there too. Surprise! It was that he could speak in such compelling language about the future God longs for that a little boy would be the first to offer up the lunch they had amongst them all along. So yeah, I go to touchy and feely really regularly these days because I don't think God's dreams are made known among us only by the rational. In fact, most of us are longing to be freed from the exile of the rational. So let's get back to the language of longings. Until our longings match or exceed our fears of loss, we cannot access the new behaviors called for by our partnership with the Spirit. You have those longings not by accident. It wasn't an accidental birth in you. Until our longings, God-given, match or exceed our fear of loss, we cannot access the new behaviors called for by our partnership with the Spirit. So a few questions to linger in our souls.
Wait, can you do that one again?
Yeah.
Do that one.
This comes to us via lots of avenues here. I was talking about this thinking it was original material, and a bishop at the House of Bishops gathering in Nashville walks up, and he's actually written a mathematical equation on the back of his business card and said, when you want to talk about what you just said sometime, we've been working on that for 10 years over here. So I realize the Spirit's working amongst us. This is not original to any of us. Until our longings match or exceed our fears of loss, we cannot access the new behaviors called for by this partnership with the Spirit. Can I get a witness here? There's a timid inquiry here. Yeah. Is there anyone here that gets, you know it. Yeah. You see it? Yeah? So for me, this practice of ministry is developing a nurturing, tending to the fire of longing until they are greater than our fear of loss. Mm-hmm. We could just spend the rest of our time here talking about those practices, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of the future as though it were already true, Jesus stands up in the synagogue and he reads this incredible description from Isaiah 61 as though it were already true. And then at the height of audacity, he stands up and he says, after he's rolled the scroll back up and handed it off, he says, this day has this prophecy been fulfilled in your ears. What? But that's his whole time among us. He's nurturing longings. He's provoking us to dream again. This is what this community, the community of the beloved, is this long-standing tradition among us. How do we nurture that such that we have what it takes to overcome this inhibited fear of loss?
I think that's the conferences at their best do that, right? Have that prophetic quality, like Hosea, who says, now I will speak tenderly to you. I'll call you back to the place where we first met, where we first fell in love, that first spark in the desert, and that's what these do at their best, right? There's something I think actually positive about the anger that I want, or the no, that I want to hold on to a little bit too, because I think that's really provides some of the energy to do entrepreneurial things or to make change. The no, there's something glorious about the no, right? And most people who church plant or do something like that, they have this little seed inside them that says, I think I can do this better, right? You know that, right? And they're kind of pissed off about something, right? They're angry about something. And I think we need that, right? But if that's all we got, then that tank is empty pretty quick. Because I remember when I was working, Karen Ward, I love her, she gave me my start, everything, man, all props to Karen Ward. And then there was a moment, about 3 years in, where I started thinking, I think I can do this better than Karen. And then I got this opportunity, I said, I'm gonna do this better. And it took me, I think, about 3 months to realize, oh no. This is not better. We just have different dirty laundry is all. And it was the same thing when we started the church. We thought, because we were a bunch of angry ex-evangelicals, and we had a lot of hurts stemming from the church. And we thought, yeah, now we're really going to do church. We're going to do it better. And we just realized, no, it was just different. We're just creating different hurts, really. And hopefully we can just constantly be aware of that. And that was a quick, humbling experience. That the anger was important. Because, sometimes, when you're angry about something, it gets things done, right? It's energy that gets things done. But the call back to the love, the way, that's the thing, that's going to be the long haul. If we don't have that, oh man, you're angry and then it's done.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's almost this interplay between warrior and midwife, isn't it?
Yeah.
The interplay, the back and forthness between, I would say they're both. They're one and the same. I've never met a good midwife who wasn't also a warrior on behalf of a healthy birth.
Right.
Or a healthy birthing cycle, however it turns out.
Yeah, that's right.
The fierceness of that presence in a family that's not yet ready for the new life emerging among them. I see you as that also. Each of you. Midwife, warrior, back and forth.
Yeah.
So there are the no's we have to learn, but there's also that original yes. How do we come back to the tenderness of that yes? Because as I've heard Ryan's story, and the story of the community there, the no's, the we could do this better, I know better than, that was a temporary distraction. They had to come back to the original longings that were the yeses for this community. So maybe our invitation to you is, how do we mutually support each other in staying close to the yes, or the yes that original yes has become? Because sometimes we start out magical. A little magical image of God and me, we're going to make it good. And then God has this consistent habit of not showing up when we thought God should. And so the yes has to evolve a little bit, and we grow our yeses into the larger yes, where God shows up, calls us to. Come, my beloved, let us take our fill of love in that chamber, that place where God chooses to meet with us. It's not in the magical cause and effect, wishful praying, God, if I do it this way, it's gonna happen, right? That's where lots of the people that we work with start out with us. Sugar daddy God. Teach me how to pray to this sugar daddy God. Let's form a tribe around the sugar daddy God. It's just us, right? We do it right. Let's form a church now. God help us if we stay with that yes, right? So, the next one is sometimes... My heart betrayed me, right? How far have you been budged away from this yes? Sometimes it's our devotion to the institution that takes us the furthest away from the yes. We become such good pleasers. We're so dearly loved. We're clever. We know how to play the game. And in the background, our soul knows better. Paul Tillich says it moves into this existential despair because it will not be deceived as we exalt matters of secondary and tertiary importance to the same level as matters of the primary importance to our hearts. Our hearts know better. So I keep asking this question because for so many of our clergy, the real challenge is getting them back to the yes. And so one of the ways we learn to assess the work needed is to keep asking, well, how far have you been budged from that yes? Where are you now in distance and relationship to that yes? Seems to be one of our primary gifts in faith communities. I will be talking about this again tomorrow with mission developers in the ELCA Mission Developer Redeveloper Training. And one of the questions I come to is this realization, it comes out of this realization. When we get too far away from our own longings, these motivations that brought us to where we are, it's easy, so surreptitious, so sneaky, that we allow other people's expectations to drive us. And then in exchange for funding and approval, we offer accountability to funding entities who have clearer expectations than our own. And we move into this place of low-level, latent resentment. Because in actuality, their expectations were clearer than our own, since we moved away from our yes. And we live with this at-oddsness, where we have this synthetic longing, exterior longing, imposed over our own, and we lose ourselves in that transactional relationship. I wrestle with this. Can I speak clearly? I do. It's a trade-off. Sometimes a well-funded position asks me to trade off loyalty to the yes, my best yes, that the Spirit called from. Can we get a witness here?
Wow. I'm sorry, I'm just taking it all in right now.
Me too. Me too. And then we love poking fun at those insane institutions, right, that do the trade with us. We love bashing it from the distance. It's cool these days. It's really cool. I mean, it's not really the work involved. The real work involved is getting back to that yes. And I know you each have your own story. I have to offer mine. It's part of the exchange. A recent story for me is I was trying to recover a recipe that I learned in Guatemala about using these green corn tortillas to do this recipe. And I knew we weren't going to get the green corn tortillas in the grocery store. So I had noticed that there was this little tienda north of the city in Asheville, in Weaverville. I drove up in there and I walked in, and with my best Spanish, I asked him, you got some green corn tortillas? He says, no, we don't. But I'll make you some if you can wait a little bit. So while I'm standing there, making time with Eduardo, he's got his tortilla press out, and he's got the green corn mash, and he's making green corn tortillas right there, hand flopped over into a pile that he's going to put in saran wrap and send me off with. 20 cents a tortilla, right there made on the spot. So while he's doing it, we're talking, and I said, so how long have you been here? 2 years, came up straight from Cuernavaca. And my family's here, and we're supporting them with this new tienda. Thanks for coming by and supporting a local business. What do you do for fun? Oh, I hang out with my friends down at the parking lot. He tells me about it. It's basically a bunch of guys from Mexico and Colombia, and they get together on Friday nights. And he says, you should come with me sometime. I'll come pick you up. And it felt like an invitation into his community, so I had to say, yes, Eduardo, come by. I'll be here 2 Fridays. So he comes by in his lowrider pickup truck, and I climb in with him, and he's playing his music from his home community. And we drive down to this parking lot that I didn't even know existed in front of an abandoned grocery store, and I come to hang out with his buddies. And it's about 40, 50 guys, and they're there just to drink beer, talk about girls and their work. And they listen to the music while they're doing their music. And I was the only Anglo there, and I asked him, just introduce me as Tom. He doesn't know anything about my background. He doesn't even ask me. I'm just a guy hanging out with him in the parking lot. But after a while, some of them look me up on the web, and a few Fridays later, one of them comes up to me and says, are you the same Tom Brackett who's a priest in the Episcopal Church? Yeah, well, why didn't you tell us, Padre? So from that moment on, I'm Padre, and I talk to them about drinking and girls and their work, and I start asking them this crazy request, quite privately, one-on-one. Hey, what's the music you listen to when you feel close to God? Or what's the music you listen to when you want to feel close to God? Oh, and they start telling me about it. Oh, I don't know anything about it. So I say, why don't you bring me a sample of it? So they start showing up, and very kind of surreptitiously, they hand me CDs that they've created, mixed tracks of the music they listen to when they want to feel close to God. Between us, right, Padre? Sure. So I stick it in my pocket, and typically I'll listen to 1 or 2 of them on the way home. And it was very touching. I felt so honored that they would choose to share this music with me. And after a while, I kind of get to know the power dynamics. And there's this one tough guy, Angel, right? Tough guy, bodybuilder. I find out he's the foreman down at the plant that most of them work at. And he doesn't speak English like the rest of them do. He's still trying to stay close to his culture, but he's trying to stay tough. Machismo, right? Angel. But Angel, too, finally breaks down, and he hands me a brown paper bag wrapped CD in a new jewel case. And I open it up, and I realize that he has handwritten his own playlist of the songs that he's included, which range from countertenor singing a very classical version of Ave Maria, all the way to Mexican street rap in the Catholic tradition, or Catholic music in the Mexican street rap tradition. I couldn't tell which was which, but he's got 6 songs that he writes at the bottom, makes me feel close to Dios, to God. And he hands it to me, and as he does, very quietly, he says, it's really between us, right? I listened to it all the way home, twice, and I cry my heart out to think that this tough guy gives me this music. So we hang out. Every time I'm in Fridays I'm in Asheville, I go down to the parking lot, and I hang out with the guys. And, people come and go, but now it's 50, 60 of them. Now it's beginning of winter, and we're hanging out there in the dark, and some of them run their engines, so they turn their headlights on, and some of them have backed in, some of them have turned in, but we're there, and we have a rhythm, and we're hanging out. And one Friday night, Angel comes to me and he says, I got to talk to you. Can we meet at the Denny's on Thursday? I have the afternoon free, 2 o'clock. So I show up at the Denny's right around the corner, and I look around, there's no Angel. And I have to lean, and I notice that around the corner in the back, there's Angel sitting there quietly looking down at the table, got a cup of coffee. He buys me one, and he says, when we start talking, he says, you're the first priest that has made room for me. And he made room for you? He said, yeah, my Mexican priest won't let me come and receive communion. I said, Angel, you're faithful, you're Catholic, you tell everybody you're Catholic. He said, I know, but he knows that I have a boyfriend. I said, yeah, well, so fine. He said, well, we've been friends since childhood. I've already gotten what he's trying to tell me, but he doesn't dare say it yet. And we've been friends for life. We want to spend our lives together. And I realize he's circling around me to see if it's okay. I said, so you have a partner, right? He said, yeah, but these guys don't know. It's between us, right? You can't tell anybody, right? And he's really nervous, and I realize he's profusely perspiring in front of me. And I said, so I'm going to read this passage to you. And I pull out the Kindle, and I dig it up, and I read to him the story of Jesus' baptism, where he hears the clouds open, a voice comes down, pigeon comes out, and says, this is my beloved, the one in whom I'm well pleased. Hear what he's got to say. And I said, if Jesus were here now, Jesus were here now, he would say to you, you, Angel, you're my beloved. And he starts to cry. And he says, how do you know that's true? And he says, that's what God calls all of us, every one of us without respect. And he takes it in, he's mute, he won't say anything else. He hugs me, we go. A week later, I get a call from his mama, only in Spanish, saying that her son was hit by a drunk driver one night in Columbia, South Carolina, while he was crossing the street. He had just parked his truck, walking across the street to a restaurant to meet a friend. Drunk driver hits him, he's instantly gone. And she says, he called you his padre, you have to do his service. Find us a church. I said, I don't have a church. She says, well, find us a church. So I go to the Catholic churches, and I ask the guys the next Friday, any of you have a Catholic church you go to? No, we don't go to church. I go to the Episcopal churches. They don't know what to do. The bishop's not clear yet about how do you offer communion to a bunch of guys who are not even received in their own church, Catholics. Would this offend their sensibilities and their Catholic tradition? We're not sure. So I go back to the guys the next Friday, and I say, hey, guys, our bishop's not sure about what to do with us here. What do you think we should do? And they said, you got to go meet with his mom. She'll tell you what to do. So I go down and I meet with them in the trailer park down there in Hendersonville, and Angel's partner is sitting across the table. I meet him for the first time. He doesn't tell me who he really is, but I'm meeting with the family, and I realize they're all together, and we're designing a service, and they say, well, where do we have the service? And by then it just dawns on me. The only way to honor what God had been doing in our midst was to meet in the same parking lot. And the liturgy that needed to come from that parking lot, and our time meeting together. And the lighting for our service had to come from their headlights. And it dawned on me in the same instant that the music for the ritual had to be the music that we'd been gathering over the year and a half. And that I had it in my pocket. I had brought all 11 of the CDs together. And so I handed it all off to them. And I said, Mom, Madre. What's the part of the service, the memorial of the dead, that speaks to your heart? It calls to you from your Catholic tradition. And she pulls it out. She pulls out her well-worn prayer book and her beads, and she helps us lay it out. And a couple of the guys had come with me, and we laid out a street ritual that they used in Mexico in their street communities. And we combined it with the Book of Common Prayer, and we printed it on bulletins in English and in Spanish, and we came together on a Friday night in the same parking lot. And they had drawn a chalk circle that they pulled all their cars up to, so that the center of the circle was led into by an open space with a table in the middle, and it was lit by their headlights. And before I even got there, they had already queued up and synced music on all the stereos around there. So we had music lined up with a little bit of variance here and there, but it all really wrapped around the space that they had created in ritual and in faith as a way of honoring this man whom they all knew was gay, whom they loved dearly, the angel in their midst. So we did the service, and it was powerful. And the father and the mother and the brothers and the sisters and the partner all pulled in with a picnic table in the back of his pickup truck, and they had his urn of ashes and green corn tortillas and grape juice for the communion service. And we shared communion together, passing from each to the other. This is the green corn tortilla that Jesus shares with us, the bread of reconciliation. This is the grape juice that we offer each other in remembrance, in the memory of Jesus who came among us. We passed out, we went down the street with a police escort that we had to wrestle out of the police department. We get to the end of Patton Avenue where they were used to squealing their tires in a U-turn before they took off racing each other down the full 4-mile length. But this time with police in the beginning and police at the end, we have almost 200 cars in procession because the word had spread. And we get halfway down Patton Avenue, and the father, who already knew the ritual better than I did, invites me to stand right behind the cab, and he takes the lid off the ashes, and we hold them up in the wind, and his ashes are spread out in this ritual of spreading the ashes. And we all go to the far end, turn around, come back into the circle, and we end there by sharing a meal with each other and telling stories about Angel's life. And I thought, whoa, that's the best. It doesn't get any better than that. And I've been living in the glow of that until a few weeks ago. Now some months have passed, and I'm in the middle of a video conference for the Episcopal Church Center from my dining room. I work from my home. And there's a knock on the door, and I open it up with my headset on now outside of the camera view, and it's a police officer. And I'm thinking, oh, God, what did my daughter do now? She's 17. I'm thinking they caught up with us. They figured out where she lives. And he says, no, it's not business. I just want to talk to you. I said, well, can you give me 5 minutes? Come on in. He sits down. We're there, sitting at the dining room table. He hears the conversation as I'm wrapping it up. And then finally I close the lid on, take the headset off. And he says, I can tell I came to the right house. You're a priest, right? Yeah. He said, you did that ritual down there in the parking lot year and a half ago, right? Yeah. Well, my partner and I were in one of the lead cars that night. And my partner says to me, as we do the U-turn and we're coming around and the ashes are flying out behind us, he says, when I go, I want this service. You got to know we wrestled with the police department to get an escort. They hated the idea. They couldn't stand that they were going to be part of a street ritual like that. And I told him that I was going to be here in your neighborhood, and we've been talking about it. He said, so I'll look you up. I told him I would look you up and see if it was okay to put your name on our police record so that if something happens to us, they can come to you and ask you to do the same service for us. Can I give you my partner's name? And I realized that the gift that Angel offered was to remind me that the original yes was not to grow the Episcopal Church or to create a thriving and vital parish somewhere. But it was to make known to people of the street God's fierce love for them. To speak in street language about what it means to be beloved. And to make it safe for people to come when they were most afraid and say, would you help us create ritual where, with as few words as possible, we can convince the skeptics among us? And have a sense that that's why you're here, too. You have your own version of that yes. But I offer you this story as a way of saying it doesn't take a lot of community organizing, although you'll hear the principles of community organizing embodied in the story as I've shared it. They have their own version of the same story. It doesn't take you knowing Spanish to engage a Spanish-speaking community. It doesn't take you being an amazing liturgist that can convince your bishop that even people who are not baptized should receive communion. It doesn't take any of that. It just takes saying, as you said so well, Ryan, it takes saying yes again and again and again and being willing to be surprised where that yes will take you. It takes a fierceness to preserve that yes. No excuses, no fear. It takes a fierceness to say no so that I can keep saying yes. Feels like there's more of the story, but it feels like a good place to pause for right now and ask, how do you hear your yeses coming up in that story? That's a good way to turn this back to you and ask, how do your yeses show up in this story?
Golly, 18 months ago, I had a friend on Facebook connect with me from high school, whom I realized friend is a very loose term. We knew of one another in high school, but we weren't real friends. We weren't people that hung out with one another. And several folks were looking each other up after a year's anniversary of our graduation. So he looked me up, and I recognized, oh, yes, I know him. And I knew he had been in JROTC in school. And he was very committed to that, and then found out after becoming Facebook friends, as you peruse one another's information, that he had had a long career in the Army and had traveled to a lot of different places. Interestingly, he never really engaged me in a conversation until I posted something about some part of the ministry that we were doing, and he decided to pick a fight online in the comments. And you get those trolls, and you go, well, he kept at it, and I thought, what the heck is going on here? And so I kind of reached out to him, and I said, man, we haven't really talked in a long time, but all of a sudden you're here on my feed, and what's going on? And I said, is everything all right? And he said, no. And I said, well, do you want to talk? And so he called me, and it was about 11 o'clock at night. And we wound up having a conversation that had me up for the rest of the night. He was getting ready to retire after a career in the military that had seen him go to every place in this world that you never wanted to be. He was trained as a ranger to be the tip of the spear point in our messed up, fucked up policies around the world. He was skilled in every way that you could kill somebody and not be seen doing it, and then spent the last part of his career teaching other people how to do that and then sending them into harm's way. As he was getting ready to retire and all honors were being put on him and he was going to retire a lieutenant colonel by the time he went out, he was trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life. And he kept on saying over and over again, I am a bad person. I am a bad man. I have done bad things. And I don't know how I can come back into this world. He also was in the midst of what was a pretty severe PTSD moment, which sounds, if you've never experienced, like for all the world, like someone's drunk when they're talking to you. He also kept on checking to make sure he was on the right cell phone, that he was on a secure line that wasn't being listened to, because that's part of his experience as well. He also was someone that could not go to any sort of counselor because his grade is so high that there are 3 counselors in the United States that he could go to that have his security clearance or higher. And he called me, he picked a fight with me and talked to me. And so as we're having this conversation, I talked to him about redemption, reconciliation, God's love for him, all of that. And he couldn't wrap his head around it. And he said, Sarah, I've done bad things. I don't know how you can understand. You're a good person. I'm a bad person. And I said, I've not killed people. I said, but in my heart I've gone there. I've hated people enough in my lowest points that I've been happy to think of them dead. And I'm not proud of that. But that's part of my experience as a human being. And Jesus says that that's just as dangerous. And he stopped, and I had named somebody, but I said there was somebody that has been, it's been a problem, and I've actually gone there. And he stopped and said, get a pen and a piece of paper. I said, okay. And I scrounged, and he said, take this number down. I took the number down, and he said, you will know when you need to call that number. And I said, what? He said, no, you'll know when you need to call that number. I'm the guy that gets that stuff done. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, in my recliner at midnight, in my pajamas, holy shit, it's like I've just been given the trigger to the nuclear bomb. I've never been that close to danger in my life. And I stopped and said, well, I don't think we're going to need to go there, but I appreciate you wanting to try and help me. I said, but what you need to know in the midst of this, and what I'm trying to tell you, is that there's nowhere that you can run, nothing that you can do that's going to outrun God's love and forgiveness for you.
Yes.
And for the amount of love and respect and esteem that people have for you. The big decision that was plaguing his mind was that he was being courted by all these multi-bajillion-dollar corporations that were going to pay him stupid money to go to Israel and go to South Africa and train people to go and do what he did. Or he could go get a $10 an hour job and feel like a schmuck. He opted for the $10 an hour job and is the happiest man you've ever met in your life. And I remember on a follow-up conversation, when I talked to him, I said, why did you call me? We didn't really know each other that well in high school. He said, I knew that you were a person who cared about people. He said, and I felt like I could talk to you. I said, do you know what job I've had? He said, no. I said, I'm a priest. He said, I've never been to church in my life. I wouldn't have called you if I'd known you were a priest.